All right, let's bring in former FBI special agent and Fox News contributor Nicole Parker and former FBI investigator Bill Daley. Nicole, we're sickened to see this happen again.
I'm absolutely heartbroken, Sandra. I apologize if I get emotional. I myself have been thinking about the school shooting that I responded to at Parkland, and there are no words that you can say. There is nothing that you can say that can take any of the pain away from these victims and from this entire community. But CB Cotton mentioned some very important points that are new to what I had, I recently learned from what she shared with us. Number one, this mass took place only on Wednesdays. It started at 8:15, and I believe the shooting began around 8:30. That is extremely important to the investigation. And this is not a publicly known mass. So the shooter had to have had close relations or knowledge of what was transpiring at that school. And law enforcement is going to hone in on that very, very carefully. The venue itself and the fact that it was children, that really is going to speak a lot to the grievance. And based on what I'm hearing, he was shooting indiscriminately through stained glass windows outside of the school. That's also very, very important. It doesn't seem that he had one particular target in mind. It seemed that this individual wanted to cause as much death and carnage and injury and harm as possible. And so I think as investigators are piecing together these little pieces of facts and information that come out, it will be absolutely critical. But looking at who the shooter was, we understand that he was in his early 20s, that he had started outside of the school and died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Weapon selection is very, very important to look at. He had a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol, and it is believed that he fired between 50 and 100 rounds. I mean, he sprayed the entire place. This person had no problem with going after the most innocent and vulnerable, children. I would like to understand, what was his relation to this school? What was his religious history? Did he have a problem with people of religion? Did he know somebody there? What was his employment history? What is his financial history? What were his relationships like? Had he been recently on any online chats or interactive gaming? Was he playing video games? Who was he interacting with? This is the type of thing that investigators are going to look at from A to Z to put together a profile of who this cowardly monster was. And I would just like to say my deepest condolences to those who have lost someone today, to those who have been injured, and to those who had to witness this, and to the entire community of Minneapolis.
Bill, to Nicole's point, there is a lot that investigators are looking into and a lot of unconfirmed information right now floating around on the internet about a possible motive. But it sounds like from what we last heard from the police chief, they have very little that they're willing to say about this shooter right now. Let's play call for number 2.
Yeah, and I think it's really wise.
Does not have an extensive known criminal history. And we are looking through information left behind to try and determine some type of motive.
So, Bill, what can you tell us is happening right now in real time as investigators try to piece together this puzzle?
Yes, and to kind of echo what Nicole said, and we all have said, it's very difficult to put any of this into words, and the grief that the individual families are feeling, as well as the community as a whole, having, nieces, nephews, grandnieces, nephews heading off to school. Myself, it certainly sends a chill up your spine. However, from an investigative standpoint, and as they take a more kind of sober look at the facts around the situation, and I think some of it was alluded to a few minutes ago with regard to him knowing this shooter, knowing that there was a mass going on. What is the tangential connection between him and the church and or the school? It's unfortunate we did see just only probably about 2 years ago a shooting in Nashville where an individual who had gone to a school came back many years later and perpetrated a horrific crime similar to this. But from an investigative standpoint, certainly I think it's important that they don't say too much at this moment. I think gathering the facts, performing a more rigorous investigation with regard to the individual, what might be out there with regard to any particular motive, any kind of breadcrumbs, or as the behavioral analysis folks like to say, kind of leakage of kind of what they might be thinking ahead of time. Was there something that gave a clue? However, I'd like to focus a little bit more on some of the other issues we see around these incidents, which is kind of the security aspect. And you know, we often hear in these cases, we ask the question: was there a school safety officer? Was an off-duty police officer around? It's unfortunate that in these days this seems to be the norm and seems to be something that, unfortunately, when all other tripwires fail, if there were any out there with regard to identifying an individual who may be looking to perpetrate such a crime, would a armed off-duty police officer or retired police officer have done something by patrolling the perimeter, not only just in this case of the school, but of the church where the students were praying? It's also interesting, and this is kind of more just data points, and certainly does nothing to console those individuals who are affected today. But just in this past week, the FBI, under Director Kash Patel, released a special crimes in schools report, 20 to 24. It was a special edition of the Uniform Crime Report where they looked at school crimes, criminal events at schools across the country. And to my surprise, when I just kind of read the top line of this, is that there were close to 1 million incidents affecting schools with regard to criminality. We don't know how many incidents may have been prevented by some of the other things that have been put in place around schools to prevent such incidents. But it was quite surprising that if you look at the data, there is certainly, and if you're a doctor, you look at this and say, look at the data, we do have a crime issue. We have a serious illness with regard to criminal aspects in and around our schools. And it's something we need to take a very sober look at in the hindsight of such a horrible incident such as today.
And thank you for that, Bill. Nicole, I want to put up on the screen, President Trump did respond shortly after we learned of this shooting on Truth Social. He posted, "I've been fully briefed on the tragic shooting in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The FBI quickly responded and they are on the scene. The White House will continue to monitor this terrible situation. Please join me in praying for everyone involved." And that we are doing, because we know that there were 17 innocent little children that were brought to area hospitals, 9 in critical condition, 4 in the operating room. The last update that we received from the head of the emergency operations at one of the big hospitals there. So we do hope to get an update on their situation soon. But meanwhile, Nicole, as we look at how this shooter carried out this horrific act, he remained outside of the building. And here's a witness who lives just 2 blocks away on what he heard. Bill Beineman, listen here.
I was on a call. All the windows of our home were open. I know what gunfire sounds like, and I could tell. I was shocked. I said, "There's no way that could be gunfire." There was so much of it, so it was sporadic. It was a semi-automatic. It seemed like a rifle. It certainly didn't sound like a handgun, and so he must have reloaded, several times for sure.
And as we listen to that, and I get your reaction to it, Nicole, I also want to include what we're just now receiving from the ATF St. Paul. This just in, ATF has completed the urgent traces of the recovered firearms and has provided that information to all investigative partners involved in the shooting at Annunciation Church this morning. This information is for investigative partners only and will not be released to the public. I'll get your thoughts on that, Nicole.
Okay, again, going back to weapon selection, that's very important in investigations. And this shooter, he didn't just take 1 or 2, he took 3 firearms. And the fact that the witness, who didn't even see the crime being committed, they heard it. And again, it sounds like he was shooting indiscriminately. He had no limits as to the destruction that he wanted to cause. And I think it's very interesting that he was outside of the school. Okay, I'm not sure of the situation and the layout of the school at this point, but the fact that he just was firing indiscriminately through a stained glass window, was he able to see his victims, or was he just firing and trying to hit as many as possible? This is what investigators will look into. But I do appreciate that you mentioned that President Trump did come out. He made an official statement. There is one thing I know for certain. I met President Trump, and he genuinely cares about the one. And he does not like to see any American hurt, let alone children. And Sandra, this is the part that as Americans, we have got to do better at this. in law enforcement. I know that there's technology that's coming out and things that are coming out that people are potentially going to be using drones in school to try to immediately respond to an active shooter, to provide some sort of fight to the shooter before law enforcement can arrive. We need to get down to the bottom of this. We need to get more innovative, increase our technology, and get things going, because it is not okay for children to go to school, a Catholic school, Sandra. They were praying. And again, this wasn't the third, fourth, or fifth week of school. This was the first week of school. This shooter, I have no doubt in my mind that this is something that they had planned and thought out for quite a while. And today was going to be the day. And again, they made sure to do it after 8:15 when the ceremony began, and make sure that they could hit as many individuals as possible. The fact that they, a self-inflicted gunshot wound, this is quite common. This is quite common in mass shootings, especially as school shootings. This person will never face justice here on this earth, but I have no doubt in my mind that he will face his maker and he will burn in hell. Because the one thing that we take very seriously in law enforcement is hurting children. And no parent should have to send their child off to school and wonder if they're going to come home. And Sandra, I've been involved in death notifications. It is absolutely heart-wrenching. There is nothing worse in this world, in my opinion, than to lose a child at the hand of evil. And so again, the investigators, they're going to go through everything. They're going to look at his profile. They're going to look at his social media. They'll look at who he was interacting with. They'll do interviews of everyone that knew him, his mental health history, his medication history. But at the end of the day, we need to fix our morals in this country. This cannot continue.
Okay. We're going to have to leave it there. Nicole Parker, Bill Daley, thank you for being with us as we unfold this tragedy we've all witnessed here this morning. Appreciate your time. Stand by for us.